Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have something a little bit different for you. So usually we do C programming, but as you can see by the prominent logo on the screen, today we are going to be installing Arch Linux. Now, why are we going to do this? There are a couple of reasons that I want to install a new operating system, and there's a reason I want to do Arch Linux specifically, mainly because I think it's a really good way for people to learn about Linux. Now, Arch Linux is rather famous for not being particularly friendly to newcomers, and that is to say that it is a more difficult operating system to use than, say, Ubuntu. And largely that's due to the installation process, which is very, very hands-on and manual. So for newcomers, Arch Linux is typically not recommended. That being said, it actually was the first Linux operating system that I used. And the reason for that is that it really suited my needs at the time. Now, Arch Linux is a highly customizable distribution, and it really comes only with the bare necessities to get it up and running, leaving the rest of the configurations to you, which is exactly what I wanted and exactly what I want now. So it's totally possible for a newcomer to Linux to start with Arch Linux. And really, it's just a matter of taking your time and going slowly through all of the different aspects of the installation to understand what's going on. That way you can make an educated decision when it comes time to actually install things. So without further ado, let us go ahead and jump into the installation process. The first thing I want to do is bring your attention to the Arch Wiki. So Arch Linux has its own wiki. I'm going to put a link to this in the chat at the moment. There will be another link in the description later. And they have a complete installation guide. Now, Arch Linux's wiki is fantastic. The documentation here is really spectacular, and the installation process is pretty much as simple as following this guide. You can really just copy these commands and it will largely work. Now, that being said, there are some decisions that we need to make along the way, and if we're just copying and pasting commands into a terminal, we don't really know what those things are doing. So the goal for today is to actually go through each of these commands and talk about what we are actually doing here. And I am going to be making decisions that are particular to my use case. So I will highlight those decisions so that you know when I am doing things that are specific to me. And the idea here is not that you would be able to replicate the system that I'm about to build, but that you would be able to build whatever system you want and the system that suits your needs. And that's really where Arch Linux shines. Okay, so there are a few things I actually had to do prior to starting this live stream to get things ready. So what you'll notice is that I am working on a MacBook Pro, and I am not about to install Arch Linux on my MacBook Pro. That would be silly. We are actually going to be installing it on this machine right here. It's just barely in the frame. I don't know how well you can see it if it's cut off on YouTube at all, but we're using the bottom laptop here. This is one of my old laptops that I'm using as a server at the moment. And what you'll notice is that it is currently closed and over there. So I had to do a few things to it to get it ready, and let's talk about what I had to do. First of all, I had to create the installation medium, okay? So the process of installing Arch Linux is kind of cool. So what you're going to do is create a USB that will actually have Arch Linux installed on it. Then you're going to boot that machine from that USB drive and use the Linux installation on the USB to basically copy the installation onto the machine itself. So the first step in installing Arch Linux is to actually install it on a USB that we can boot from. Now, you're going to want to download it first, and let's take a look here. So usually what I do is it's going to have a bunch of mirrors for all of these different places in the world. I'm just going to hit Control F, and I already did it, United States. And it'll bring me right there. And I am going to pick one of these mirrors. Now, I believe the one I chose was kernel.org. This is usually where Linux kernels are released. So I recognized kernel.org as a trustworthy site, so that's where I chose to download it from. Of course, archlinux.org would be a reasonable choice as well, but basically you're just going to pick a mirror and download it from there. And once you do download it, it's a good idea to verify the signature. Now, what does that mean? Basically, we can use a hashing algorithm to confirm that what we just downloaded is in fact the Arch Linux installation and not something malicious. So if you're using mirrors like this, it's possible that an attacker could intercept it and give you something else. And so what we want to do is validate what we downloaded to confirm that it is the same. And what we can see here is that Arch Linux provides us with some checksums. So we can use a command on the terminal to actually validate this. So that's what we're looking for here. Now, I have Arch Linux downloaded as an ISO file, not there, here. And I have a bunch of other junk in here, apparently. But this arch.iso is what I downloaded. So what I'm going to do over my terminal is just do chasum on downloads/arch.iso. And what this is going to do is hash the file. So it's going to, I don't want to get too much into hashing algorithms here, but suffice to say it will confirm if this output is exactly the same as what they say on the Arch wiki, we know that we have the right file. So I'm just going to look at the last few digits here, 4E5FEB, and we can confirm 4E5FEB. Good idea to actually do the full check and make sure this is the same, but I've already done that. So I'm going to glaze over that step. Really, the purpose of this is just to confirm that we have the right thing, and you probably will. So we've confirmed that we have the right ISO file, and the next step is going to be to actually prepare the installation medium. And to do this, we need to flash that ISO file to the USB. Now, I have a video that I made, actually one of the first videos I made on this channel is how to flash a USB from the terminal without any third-party software. And I will recommend that video again, and I'll put a link to it in the description once the stream is over. But there's a much easier way, and it is from a company called Balena, and they make a product called Etcher. Now, this is an open source project. You can see right here on GitHub, they are sharing their code. So highly recommend this software. It's about as easy as this animation shows. You will simply select the image, select the USB that you want to flash it to, and it will do the rest for you. This is probably the easiest way to do things. And I do want to point out that I found this process to be a little bit finicky. So I had to flash my USB a couple of times. And the problem ended up being the specific USB that I was using. So if you have trouble, try using a different USB. And to give you the error message, it was something along the lines of /dev/disk/bylabel/arch_202104 of April. It did not find that, and that was causing an error, so it wouldn't actually boot. Since I'm not going too much into detail there, but the point is, if you have trouble, try using a different USB, try reflashing it. It can be a little bit of a finicky process. But once we have that USB, the next step is to actually plug it into the machine and actually boot from it. So how do we do that? Well, unfortunately, I can't show you because I'm working on my Mac and it's over there. So I'll just have to describe the process. Essentially, what you want to do is interrupt the startup process of your machine. When you first hit the power button, it's sort of a process that happens. You notice it takes a little bit of time before you can actually start working on it, and that's the initial setup that's happening. Essentially, as soon as you turn on the machine, it goes into the bootloader, which is going to start everything up and get your operating system ready to be used. So what we want to do is actually interrupt the startup process before that begins. And this will change depending on which machine you are using. So on that machine, I had to basically, after I hit the power button, I just hit escape immediately. And in some machines, you're going to hit F9 or F13 or something like that. So it will change depending on which particular computer you're using. What I recommend is when you turn it on, usually at the bottom left, it will say, hit this button to interrupt the process. So once you do that, it will give you the option to choose a boot device. You will choose your USB, and then it will boot into the live environment. So typically, the next step is going to be to set the keyboard layout, but here we have one of the particulars of my use case. I am using this as a server, so I am not going to be using that computer's built-in keyboard. It's a laptop. So I don't really care what the keyboard layout is. I'm using my Mac. It's this keyboard layout. So I don't need to do this step, and also I need to install this operating system over an SSH connection. So there are a few steps that I have to do prior to any of this. So over here, they have another guide for doing this. And essentially what you do, once you log in, you create a password for the root account that comes in that installation medium. And then you need to edit the, where is it? Here we go. The file etc/ssh/sshd config. And you want to make sure that permit root login is yes. Now, it is yes by default. I don't know if it's uncommented. I think it is. But we basically have to set a password for the root account and then confirm that we are allowed to log in over SSH as root. And then we need to start the SSH service. So systemctl start sshd.service. Now, once we do that, we are good to go and we can go into the live environment. So I am going to close this and let's do that now. Well, I made a mistake. So you see, I did not say root. So there is no Eric on this machine. So you'll see that that was denied. So let's try that again. I need to say root at. So when you're using SSH, excuse me, when you're using SSH, if you don't put a username and then the @ sign, it's going to use whatever username you're currently logged in as. Now, since it's just this live installation medium, the only account on there is root. So I have to specify that I'm logging in as the root. When I do that, password. Now, just so you know, this root account that I have just logged into is different from the root account that will be on the system that I end up actually using. So this root account is going to go away. So at the moment, the password for this root account is password. I made it really easy because it's not going to be sticking around. Eventually, I'm going to put in a password of my own. I'm going to make it a long, secure, cryptic password of random numbers and letters, and I am not going to really use it because I'm going to set up an SSH private key for this. But we'll get to that in a little while. We are now logged in to the Arch Linux live environment. We are logged into that computer right there. So what is our next step? Well, we don't need to set the keyboard layout since I am not actually working with a keyboard. But to do that, first of all, what they say is that the default key map is the United States. So even if I was going to be using that keyboard, it's pretty much already set up as is. If not, what you want to do is actually see what key mappings are available and then pick the one that you want using this load keys command. But since I don't need that, we can skip that step, and what we're going to do is just check the boot mode. Now, there are a couple of different ways that a machine can boot, and your installation process is going to be slightly different depending on how you do it. I think most machines, if I remember correctly, are using UEFI. I'm pretty sure that most machines do. I think mine, I know mine does. So if I do this, and what we'll see is that if the command shows the directory without error, the system booted in UEFI mode. So if I type in this command, ls sys firmware EFI EFI vars, and we see we have a lot of stuff. So we are indeed booting in EFI or UEFI mode. Yeah, the other options are BIOS and CSM, and there's a different installation process for these. So we are going to be using the UEFI mode here, and I do believe that is the most popular. Okay, so now that we have confirmed the boot mode, what we want to do is make sure we are connected to the internet. Now, how you do this depends again on your use case. So in my case, I just plug in an Ethernet cable, and it's just going to connect to the internet. So if I do IP link, we'll see that I am already up. And where's my IP address? It doesn't show it. There we go. 192.168.109, so I am indeed connected to the internet, and we can confirm this by using ping, and typically we'll do archlinux.org, and there we can see we are indeed connected to the internet. So we are good to go on that front. Now, if you are not connected to the internet, the first thing to do is to verify that it actually booted correctly. So when I was trying this in the initial setup for this, I was having trouble getting connected to the internet, and it had to do with that USB. Remember, I said the process was a bit finicky. So if you are not connected to the internet, make sure that you are actually booted into the live environment. It should be root at arch ISO. Okay, if it doesn't say root at arch ISO, then something has gone askew. Okay, if you are indeed booted into the environment correctly and you are not connected to the internet, if you are using Wi-Fi, then you will probably use this Wi-Fi menu command. And that comes with this installation medium, but I don't need to use it. It basically gives you a way of selecting a Wi-Fi network and typing in a password for it. I don't need to use that since I'm using Ethernet, and Ethernet is as simple as just plugging it in. Okay, so we are connected to the internet, and now we want to update the system clock. So we want to just ensure that it is correct, and time date CTL set NTP true. Don't know what set NTP means, but basically what we're going to do is just paste in that command, and let's see what it says. It doesn't say anything, so let's see what the status is. 13, okay, that does not seem right. But that's okay, actually. So this, it is in fact wrong on my machine. So where I am, it is currently 920, and my machine thinks it is 1320 or 120. But that's because it is using UTC. And here we come across another instance of my particular use case. I have decided that for this machine, I'm using it as a node on a network, and I've decided that that network is going to not have time zones. I don't like time zones. I think they're silly, so we're not going to do them. I get to make those decisions since I make the thing. Anyway, we are all going to just use UTC. It is 1320 everywhere. And whether 1320 is early in the morning or late at night for you, who cares? It's 1320. So I actually want this machine to use UTC, or the universal time. So this is actually fine. Even though it is technically wrong, in my use case, it's going to be correct. And this is a good opportunity for me to point out that this people may have problems with the way that I set things up. That's fine. Everybody is going to have different preferences for how they set things up, and I am probably going to get comments saying that I have done this wrong. That's going to be fine. The system will work, and if there are problems, we will deal with them. Okay? So I'm comfortable with the time zone as it is. And so what I want to do now is partition the disks. And this is sort of the first significant task. So what does it mean to partition a disk? Well, we have our hard drive, and my hard drive has several, I think it's probably 500 gigabytes of storage on that machine. It's an old machine, so I don't really remember. I think it might be 500 gigabytes of storage. And As it stands, let's imagine that it's not an old computer, it's brand new, and that hard drive is completely blank, fresh from the factory. Well, we need to actually create sections of that hard drive. Essentially, what we're going to do is create virtual hard drives within the hard drive. And we need to do this to sort of separate different parts of the machine. If you remember, I was earlier talking about the process when you start your computer and how that process basically it'll launch the bootloader, which will then kind of load your operating system. And what we're going to do is put that bootloader in its own virtual hard drive. And then we'll have another virtual hard drive for the actual files that we want to store. So we want to actually separate out the hard drive into discrete sections, and that is called partitioning. Now, you have some wiggle room in how you do this. There are basically 3 partitions you need at a minimum, but you get to actually make some decisions here. So what we're going to do is use the fdisk command. So let's do fdisk-l first. Okay. So here we can see I have a few partitions. First of all, I have a few different devices. Well, not really. These are all partitions on the drive as it is. So dev/SDA is the actual hard drive that I have, and SDA1 is the first partition on that hard drive. So what we can see here is that this hard drive already has partitions in it. The problem is these partitions were made by Ubuntu, and so they're not going to work for me anymore. I need to basically redo them. And we need to be a bit careful here because there's a lot of different disks apparently, and this one seems to have been created by Ubuntu. I don't know where that is on the physical machine. That's a bit interesting. And same thing with this. These are things that Ubuntu created. I don't really know what those are. And that is sort of why I am wanting to do this tutorial with Arch Linux. When you do an installation of Ubuntu or a Debian or Fedora, it's going to do things like this, where it just decides that you're going to have this dev loop 0 and dev mapper Ubuntu, whatever this is. And I don't know what it is. I don't know how it works. It's an open source project, so I could find out. I just haven't. But this is the sort of thing that I'm trying to avoid by installing Arch Linux. Since I have to actually create these things myself, the system I get at the other end of this is going to be perfect for my needs. And there's not going to be anything on there that I don't know about. Okay? So we know what those are. I probably need that command again, actually. And what we need to do is actually create the partitions. And so what we need to do is use fdisk to actually select the drive that we want. Now, what we want is this SDA drive. So we're going to fdisk/dev/SDA. And this is interesting. What is this? What is SDB here? Well, SDA is the one we need. Has 697, 700 gigabytes. That is actually ringing a bell for that machine. Do be careful when you do this, because when you actually partition the drive, you are going to wipe everything on there. So if there's anything on there that I actually wanted, that's going to be a problem, because I'm going to lose it. So make sure you select the correct drive and make sure that you actually want to do this, because it is not a reversible process. But I do know that I want this SDA drive, and so I'm going to select that. And what we're going to do is create some new partitions. Now it would be useful to pick up this. And actually they give us some example layouts. Here we can see, here is the example layout for UEFI. And essentially we create a mount partition and a boot and EFI partition. I think that's quite Anyway, let's see how we're going to do this. I'm just going to refresh myself on the command. I believe it's just, let's use M. Okay. So what we want to do is actually repartition the entire drive. And I believe it's going to be this GPT partition table. Let me just make sure. Okay. We'll use G. I don't think that was what I was meant to do. Let's see. Okay, that's all the different types that we have. I apologize for this. Why is it not? There we go. So yeah, I apologize. I'm forgetting the command here. Listing them, changing them, make it bootable. There's a particular way in which these initial ones need to be set up, and I don't know that off the top of my head, so what I'm doing is trying to find exactly where that is and what those commands are for it. If any of you guys know the command, I would appreciate it in the chat too. Well, I just happen to forget what it is. I know. N. N is the command. Okay. And I think I want to delete all of the partitions first. Okay, so I've cleared it. And let's see if we can list the current partitions just to make sure that that was cleared. Menu, where is that? Print information about the partition. P. Okay. There we go. Okay, I think we are good to go there. So what we need to do is actually create our partitions. I have wiped that drive. It is clean, good to go, and now what we're going to do is create our partition map. So fortunately, I don't quite remember what it is. So oh, here we go. So we have /mount/boot or mount/EFI, and 250 MB. Okay, so these tables can be a little bit confusing to look at. So let's talk about what is actually happening here. Right here in this column, that was a bad highlight. This column, the partition column, these are the partitions that we need to create. And here is where they are going to eventually end up. If I was going to edit this wiki, I would probably switch these two because this sort of is, this exists prior to this. Anyway, so we're going to create these 3 partitions, and we need at least 250 MB for our EFI boot partition. So I'm going to create a first partition, and I'm going to give it more than 260. I'm going to give it, let's give it 300 just to be safe. So we're going to, what's the command for a new one? There we go. We're going to, now we have to decide which number of partition this is. Okay, so we're going to just leave this part as the default. It's basically a name for the partition, and this is we're just going to use 1 as the default. That's fine. Now, the first sector is where on the drive this starts. If you think of all the different memory addresses on the machine or on that hard drive, which is the very first one for our system? And what you're going to notice is that we actually don't start at 0. There is something between 0 and 34 that exists there. I don't actually know what that is, so if you do, please let me know. But anyway, we are going to... One thing I am noticing, that is a rather interesting number. So if we think about it, 34 as the first address that we can use. Why would it be 34? Well, if we imagine that the very last character or the last byte is null, a null terminal character, then what we would imagine is that the preceding data would be 33 bytes, and then 32 bytes is something that's kind of common on computers. So this is just total speculation. I don't know for sure. That is very close to a very popular number in computer science. So I don't know what that exactly is, but it's interesting to note. Anyway, I'm comfortable accepting the default here for the first sector. I recommend doing the same. And here is where we are going to set the size. Now, you can type in an actual number like this. This is the very last sector. But what I want to do is actually make it based on where I started. And I want to set like rather than saying I want from this byte to this byte, I want to say start here and give me 260 MB. So what I want to do is actually say plus 300 M. Now, since this is not a hard drive that is fresh from the factory and there are things on there, it's going to warn me that rewriting this is going to wipe everything. I think you guys just got a little notification on my iPhone. Sorry about that. Anyway, yes, I do want to remove this. And again, remember that this is going to wipe your system. Now, if you make a mistake at this stage, we actually aren't going to be committing any of this until the very end. So you do have the opportunity to go back. I will point out the point of no return when we get there. Anyway, I do want to remove the signature. Okay, so the signature will be removed by the write command. Again, that's your fail-safe. That's our point of no return. But at this point, I want to create another new partition. So this is going to be 2. Now, the first sector is going to be basically here. We can see that this incremented. So to shorten the math, basically, this number plus 300 MB, not megabytes, is this number. And that's about as easy as the math as I'm going to go. So our first sector now is the end of the previous sector. So we are again going to accept the default. Now, what is this partition? A swap partition. Okay, before we actually create a swap partition, let's talk about what a swap partition is and why we would or would not use one. Let's see, where is article on a swap partition? Let's see. Go. Swap. Swap is a way of creating kind of a virtual memory space for your machine. So this machine here, my server, has 8 GB of RAM. Now, if I want more physical RAM, I can either buy more RAM or I can dedicate part of the hard drive to become RAM when necessary. Now, this isn't as wonderful as it may sound. Now, since I have 700 GB of memory or hard drive space on that machine, I could in theory give 700 GB of RAM to that machine. But when you are using the swap partition as RAM, it's still physically a disk drive. So it's slow, okay? So you're still going to have to read from the CD. I guess it might be faster if you have a solid state drive, but in this case, I have a regular hard drive, and it's going to be much slower. So even though I have the ability to kind of go crazy here and give it a lot of RAM, I'm not going to do that because the dedicated RAM is actually more efficient and it's faster. But giving some amount of memory to swap may improve performance in certain use cases. Now, they have a list of when those use cases are somewhere. Here we go. I'm not going to go through this right now. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically what it says is that if you use this improperly or in the wrong use case, then it's possible to actually have worse performance as a result. And one of the features that we'll want to focus on is this swappiness, which is fun to say. Swappiness basically means how likely is your machine to actually put a task on that swap partition. So if we imagine having let's say we have our 8 gigabytes of RAM and we try to add a new task that would require a 9th gigabyte, what the machine will do is actually move the task over to the swap partition. And what we want to do is determine how likely the machine is to do that. And we'll do that with this variable called swappiness. Now, I am thinking that for my use case, I am going to double the amount of RAM that I have on that machine by creating a swap partition of another 8 gigabytes. Roughly 8 gigabytes, I believe it's gigabytes in this case. I don't know what the difference between a MB and a megabyte is. Maybe you can tell me in the comments. But yeah, I'm basically going to double the amount of RAM that I have on that machine by creating an 8 gigabyte partition and making it a swap partition. But I want the computer to basically prioritize the dedicated RAM over the swap drive. So I want a low swappiness. We'll come back to that after we create the partition. Basically, that is going to suffice to say that what we want to do is make the last sector plus 8G. And that's going to be our swap partition. I do want to remove that signature. And now we can come back to the example partition. So we've created our swap partition. And finally, we want a root partition. And this is going to be the rest of the device. Now, what's interesting is that when I first did this, I followed a tutorial on YouTube as well from Learn Linux TV. And I thought his tutorial was great, but I remember, he created 3 partitions on his machine, and one of them was not a swap partition. I believe that he created a partition for mount, boot, and /home, where the users are actually storing things. I don't remember exactly what went on there, so if you are interested, you could check his channel and see that. Really good tutorials, but I'm going to stick with this partition map. The reason being, again, is particular to my use case. I am creating a node on a blockchain network, and this thing is going to operate pretty much as a dedicated node, server on that network, and the only thing it's going to be storing are these blocks. Now, I do have a decision to make in terms of partitions as to how I want it to store those blocks. So I could create a partition that is dedicated to blocks. So let's think about it like this. Let's imagine the space in my hands here is all of the memory that we have. And let's say I, as the user, am just creating some files over here. So I'm just eating into the memory like this. And then over here, I'm creating blocks. And so it's eating into the memory. And I just have this much available until I have no more available. Now, if I do all of this on the same partition, there are no rules as to how much of it is block and how much of it is my own personal files. But if I do create partitions, then I can say that I have 500 gigabytes for blocks, and I have 200 gigabytes for personal files. And if I use up the 200 for personal files, I will still have this 500 here for blocks. And now that I say it out loud, that actually seems like a wise thing for me to do. Except for the fact that I'm really not going to be using this for anything other than blocks. So here is where you need to actually think about how you're going to be using the machine and what you actually need. Now, I can think of an argument for creating a partition directly for blocks, but I don't think this server is going to be used for anything other than this blockchain network. Pretty much the only thing it's going to store is the binary executable for the program and the blocks. So I'm comfortable just leaving the rest of my hard drive available on this third partition. So we'll create this third partition. We're going to do N for new. We'll use the third partition. First sector is going to be default. And then the last sector, we're also going to use the default. This will just give it the rest of the system. All right. So now we have created all of our partitions. And we will probably want to list them. Let's see. Print the I. Uh-oh. Oh. I want to print the map. I don't have these commands memorized. I apologize for that, but list free, unpartitioned, list known, partition types, added, new, print. There it is, P. Okay, so here we can see that we have our three partitions, SDA1, SDA2, and SDA3. SDA1 is where our bootloader is going to go. We have given it 300 MB, and it's just the beginning of the hard drive. SDA2 is going to be our swap partition. This is what we're going to use for a sort of additional virtual RAM stick. And we've given it 8 GB, and here are its beginning and ending sectors. And finally, we have SDA3, which is just going to be the rest. This is where all of our personal files are going to end up. And we have given that 690.3 GB. All right. Now, we're not quite done with these partitions yet because we need to format them. There are different ways that you can store things, and this has to do with endianness and a variety of things that have to do with file systems. Now, we need to make them in a particular way. So we have an ext4 on root partition, and we have a swap on that. Well, first, we actually need to write this out. So I'm going to hit W. Now, that is the point of no return. Okay, now that I've hit W, this partition map is locked in, and that is now the partition. Everything that was on that hard drive, gone. So, we're not going back. All right? We have written that partition, and now we need to format it. So I'm going to use this ext4 on the root partition, and that is going to be our SDA3. So mkfs.ext4/dev/SDA3. Is that correct? Yes. Interesting. In use by the system. Okay. Here's where we run into some potential problems. Now, I fully expected when I started this stream to run into a problem like this, and I feel like part of the process of installing Arch Linux is going to be running into problems. And you're going to run into problems when you install it, and I am running into a problem right now. And part of the process is figuring out what's wrong. So it says dev/SDA3 is apparently in use by the system. Now, my initial instinct is to try and unmount it. But I don't know what that's going to do. If I try and unmount this thing and it doesn't work, or it causes a problem, that thing is underneath 3 other computers, and it's going to make for a very strange live stream if I try and pull it out and fiddle with it. So I want to avoid having to open that at all costs. So what else might be the problem here? Let's see if we can create the swap partition, actually. Let's try it out on a different partition and just see what happens. So mkswap. Old, setting new. Okay, that seems to have worked. Now, unfortunately, they're not telling me. It needs this. Okay. So the swap partition worked fine. And what I want to do now is see if I can partition or make the file system for the first partition, which needs this EFI system partition. And what is the command for that? Let's see. Okay, here we go. mkfs.fat. -f32 for fat32. And we want to do that on /dev/sda1. That seems to have worked. And here's the one that didn't work initially. Do you want to proceed? Still says it's apparently in use. I'm going to go ahead and try and unmount it. This could be an unwise thing to do. Not mounted. Interesting. Let's see. Something peculiar is going on here. It still says that is a Linux file system, even though it should be an EFI system. Where did I put that in there? So we made the swap, and we made this one. One seems to be working. Sometimes things just don't update right away, so it might be that it worked fine and I'm just not seeing it, but I'm not comfortable moving on to the next step until I am confident that that is the case. I don't want to just start mounting things until I know that they've been set up correctly. I'm going to jump back into fdisk. And let's see. I want to print the table. I don't think I can use these commands in here. No, I can't. Okay. Quit. And LVM2 member file system. That seemed to work. Well, peculiar, very peculiar, but that is part of the process of installing Arch Linux. So let's see. The one that's pretty strange is this first one. So I typed in the last command and I did not get any error message where I did before. And it should be a Linux file system. So this really wouldn't look any different, which is unfortunate. So what I want to do is try and get this one to say EFI system. And I'm not sure why it did not. So F32, we're just trying it again. And then /dev/SDA1. Okay, it seems to... It doesn't seem to be changing. So, here's the part where I am wondering... I'm wondering what the consequences of moving on might be. So, it's looking rather strange that I'm running this command. It seems to be giving me the output that it is working. It's not saying that there was an error, but then if I do fdisk on dev/SDA, and then I print the map, it's still a Linux file system, and it needs to be EFI. I'm not sure why it's not changing. Let's see. What would the consequences... Let's say I move on, and I keep this as it is, and I don't actually get the output that I want. And let's say that it is correctly... Let's say it is correct, and it's just for some reason outputting the wrong information. The consequences of moving on would be that it would work. So that is a desirable outcome. But the other scenario is that this is actually written correctly and the file system is still wrong. Now, what would the consequences of moving on be if that was the case? Well, pretty much everything I do in that partition would need to be redone. Now, I could probably get away with continuing the installation process for these two, but it could get a bit messy. And you see, the YouTuber in me wants to move past this point, but the computer scientist in me knows better. So let's see. It is not liking me trying to make this FAT32 file system. See. Install DOS F. Okay, it seems like that's already installed. Get the message. I'm not getting that message, so that's not relevant. You see, their wiki really is good, but it is also not providing enough here. It just says to use this command, and it doesn't say how to confirm that it actually worked. It doesn't say what to do if it doesn't work. Unfortunately, not quite enough for me in this instance. So let's head to Google. And also, I have you guys in the chat, so if you know the answer, feel free to shout it out to me. Let's see. Let's see. No effect. Here's one for Arch Linux specifically. Nothing here. Yeah, see, the installation medium already has this DOSFS tools, or DOS file system tools, I guess that stands for, and should do the trick. By the way, live got DOSF tools, but you need to install it during packstrap. If I boot, you need grub DOSF tools and EFI boot manager. Ensure that the partitions are aligned for this step. You guys using gdisk apparently. Oh. Oh, I think it's actually in. Okay. So let's hit M and change the partition type. There it is. Okay, I forgot to do that. I want to change the partition type of drive 1. And I want to list the types, and it's an EFI system. Okay, there we go. So this was something that I actually was supposed to have done while I was creating each partition. For each one, I should have set the partition type for each one. And it just so happens that for all of them, well, look at this. I should change that one. So on 2, our swap partition. See, we have a actual dedicated type of a swap partition. So if I put 2, and I am going to make it, what number? 19. So partition 2 should be of type 19. And then partition 3, there it is. Okay. That was a step that I forgot to do, and I am going to point out that Arch Linux doesn't, their wiki doesn't say to do it, so not entirely my fault. I will take some responsibility because I am claiming to be knowledgeable by doing a live stream here. However, that should have been mentioned. Okay, so we needed to set the actual partition type within fdisk. First one is going to be an EFI system because we're using UEFI mode. The next one is a Linux swap because this is a swap partition. And then the last one is just the Linux file system. Now we can write that out. Okay, remember using W there is our point of no return for these changes. And let's go through and use these file system commands again. I'm losing battery, so I'm going to need to unplug the face cam, and we will continue right along. One of these days I'll get an additional port on my Mac, and for a long time I did not mind that the MacBook Pro only had 2 USB ports, but now I need 3. One for the camera, one for the microphone, and one for power. And now it is a nuisance, but hey. Anyway, let's see. Not that. Is okay. Right. mkfs.ext4/dev/sda3. Okay, now we're getting that again, but mkfs.fat-f32 on /dev/sda1. That seems to have worked. And mk swap, is that right? Make swap /dev/sda2. I think that looks good. A little bit worried about this SDA3. Change it, yes. Currently in use by the system. Not unmount, but umount. Not mounted. So it's probably there's a little frowny face there. I didn't notice that before. Anyway, there's a at this point I feel more comfortable moving on and assuming that this is okay. And the reason is that if I print that partition, it actually looks as it should. Now, really, I think this is an object lesson in if you are a beginner trying to install Arch Linux, this is the approach I want you to really consider taking, where you're going to run into problems, and the key is to be comfortable moving slowly through those problems and really finding out what is causing the issue. So I am not ready to move on to mounting the file system until I have the actual correct output from this. I really want to move on, and for the sake of the YouTube video, I want to move on. But for the sake of doing this correctly, it's really important that I find out why that problem was there. Okay, the problem being that when I try and make the file system, it says it's in use by the system. Had luck last time by opening fdisk again. Let's Google the error message. Go. Side trick for you guys. I never accept all the cookies. I just never click accept. If you hit inspect element, you can just delete these things. Gone. Toodles. Okay. Let's see. Check your partitioning once again, but without specifying f-l. We've got the array. If you find in output something like dev/md0, it means you have got SW array, and disk that you're trying to format contains metadata of that array. That is some horrible grammar, but let's take a look. All right, fdisk-l. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything of MD0. Perhaps it's this or this. Maybe one of these are causing a problem. Or SDB. Yeah, what is this SDB? Where's it coming from? All right. Unmount those. What is he trying to partition here? Okay, so when this guy is doing the partitioning, he's doing SDB. And so here, we need to change this to SDA here. But I don't really want to just type in random commands from someone that's not really explaining themselves well. So This is a popular answer on Stack Overflow, but I mean, this sentence doesn't make any sense. It means that you have got SW array and disk that you are trying to format contains metadata of that array. That's not an English sentence. So I'm not going to type in this person's commands since they can't really explain what's going to happen. This is a good hint as to what's wrong, but I'm going to wait until I have an actual explanation. So this person says /dev/sdb is in use because there are partitions in that OS. See again, there are partitions on it that the OS is aware of. If you want to create a file system on it, that idea, confused, yeah, whatever. First, remove the existing partitions. No benefit, and say what you mean. So this person is saying that the problem is that the drive itself, in this case SDB, is partitioned. So there's SDB1. And this person is arguing that the error is being caused by there being partitions. And what I'm going to look at is, if we see, where is this guy? Yeah, so this guy is actually running the command on the entire device, so just SDB, whereas we are using particular partitions. So I said SDB1 or SDB2, and so that is actually inappropriate. We are, in fact, putting the correct partition on there. Wonder if I just unmount the entire drive. No. And also not 3. Okay. Okay, so Oogway says, this is an old post, but I encountered the same problem when I tried to create a file system to one of my hard drives. The system complains and says, that drive is apparently in use by the system. Will not make file system here. That is indeed the error that we are getting. Let's see. Yes. Now, they didn't say anything about this line, which is something we might want to Google later. But anyway, commands F user and whatever that is did not yield anything useful. Here's what I did to find the cause of the problem, and I went to the etc directory and searched for any files that mentioned the drive SDC. I did not find anything, so I expanded the search to include the next layer below, and that did find the offender. Okay. I know those files are being used by target CLI. So once I detached that storage and rerun the mkfs command, the same command ran without any issue. Okay. So here is a command that I do feel comfortable typing in, because this is just supposed to find something. So I am going to use this one. I think that's one full command. Is that right? Okay. Apparently not. Let's just do that first line then. Nope. Okay. This guy just unmounted. I tried that. This guy tried wiping the hard drive. Sven doesn't like that. That's funny. Oh boy. Anyway, let's see if there are any comments. Part of a RAID array? No. Hmm. Okay, so you know. Oh, hello, Jinku. I think that's how you're pronouncing that. Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining me. Now let's see. I have a. When I was working on the UFE the EFI system partition, I made sure to really take my time and get it so that that looked right. Now, as for the file system here for formatting this partition, in my previous partition map, this partition was also ext4. So here's a question that I don't have an answer to. Does that ext4 file system remain after I've created this new partition map? I don't know. And it's hard for me to confidently move until I do. So actually, I'm going to try something. All right. So if I do ls, I'm going to create a directory. Okay, and now I'm going to mount /dev/sda3 to test. Yep, okay. If I had moved on, I would have had errors because the file system that I created in the previous partition does not actually carry over. And this, I think we are getting exactly the error that I was mentioning a little while ago. Uh-oh. LVM2 member file system. Okay, let's take a look at that. What does that mean? Okay, this guy is doing roughly the same thing using fdiskl. Partition SDA3 with this, type df, get the following output. I did not use df, I don't know what that does. Likely your system files. It only shows 3 file systems present. The first is mandated by EFI and is where grub resides for EFI to boot your kernel. Is boot. This isn't really answering anything. I wonder. Let's see. Okay. Go into fdisk again, and what I want to do is set the file type for partition 3, and let's list them. Let's see what all of the options are. So 20 seems appropriate. I don't see any LVM in here, unless that means Lenovo boot partition. Probably not, but not really sure why. So, Linux LVM, look at that. Okay. Let's try 20. And let's write that. And now we can mkfs.ext4/dev/sda3 still contains that file system. Okay. Shouldn't. Wonder if there's a way that I could delete a partition. Print information. Verify. Let's see that. What does that do? I don't know why it is saying that this contains an LVM. What does that mean? All right, I'm going to take a brief break, grab some water, and I will be right back. Please give me some time here. And if you happen to find or have an idea for something we can try here, do let me know in the comments. I will be right back. Okay, so I had a little think, and I think we are going to do this partitioning again from the beginning. Oftentimes, if I run into a problem in an installation like this, I will go back and repeat the step. So let's roll back until we get to this part. Now, let's start with fdisk-L just to see. It'll be repetitive, but that's okay. And let's be a little more careful as we read through this. Dev SDA is my 700 gigabyte hard drive. Disk model HGST. Not telling me anything particularly crazy. Okay. SDB. This is my USB. And this is where the Arch Linux ISO is. This is my installation medium. These two, I don't know what these are. And especially this one that has 200 gigabytes available to it. That is odd. I don't know what that is or where that device is. Unless it is mounted somewhere. I don't know what that is, okay? But so be it. Let's see. All right. Well, we know that we want to do SDB. So, okay, fdisk dev/SDB. Oh, look at this. Corrected by a write. The device contains ISO signature and it will be removed by the write command. Okay, so yeah, it seems that something was askew here. Maybe it's because at the very beginning I typed in the wrong initial command. So probably redoing this will hopefully fix everything. So Let's create our partitions again, and I'm going to use n. We'll create one. No. Let's see, can we clear it? List free on partition space. Change the type. Write the table. I'm wondering if there's a command to just wipe the thing. Let's see. Okay, so here they're giving some examples. SDA is the first partition. What I'm looking for is a way to wipe the entire partition. Let's actually go back so we don't lose that page. Disk. Creating a new partition table. Okay, here we go. 0 at the prompt. G. O or G. Which one do we need? I tried G last time and that didn't work, but let's see. If we look at those partitions again, GPT MBR, and this gives us G. Yeah, so apparently we should use G for a GPT partition table. Okay. Okay, well, let's try it. G. Device contains, it will be removed by the write command. CF disk man page, wipe option for more details. That's fine. Okay, so now we'll hit new. 1. And first sector, we'll keep the default. And we're going to give it, let's give it a little bit more, 500 M. That should be plenty. Okay, now the type for partition 1 needs to be an EFI system. By the way, I'm typing Q after that command to actually get my prompt back. There we go. Horrendous. Love your C programming stuff. G for UEFI. Thank you, Horrendous. And welcome. I'm glad you're here. Anyway, so we're going to use the 1 for EFI system. Okay? So we've changed it to a EFI system, so now we'll create another partition. It'll be 2. This is going to be our swap drive. The first sector will keep default, and I'm going to say plus 8G for 8 GB. Value out of range. What's that? First sector, fine. Last sector, plus 8G, value of range. It shouldn't be. Last sector, change the type. Alt 2, start sector. Why is that out of range? That shouldn't be out of range. Okay, let's just do plus 5G. Let's see. Still out of range. Plus 1G. Okay. Print it. Okay. Let's. Oh boy, we're gonna have to do it again. N1 First sector is fine. I want to add how much? Okay, let's check it again. This is getting a little bit crazier than I thought. I wasn't expecting it to go this way. That's all right. Plus 260 MB. I added 500 or 300 the first time. Let's try that again. Plus 300 M. Okay, and let's create the type, which is 1. Okay, now we create a new one. 2. First sector plus 8G. Value out of range. What is going on here? All right, let's try it one more time. And this time I am going to actually set the type after. And let's see if that has an effect. 1, first sector is fine. And we're going to add 300 M. Okay, we'll create another new one. 2, first sector is fine, plus 8G. Value out of range. What in the world is going on? Worked fine the first time. I'm gonna quit that. And let's take another look here. So SDA has that many GB available. Okay, let's try this. What I'm going to do is actually call fdisk again on dev/sda. I typed that wrong. Let's just cancel. Okay, and now I'm going to use G. I'm going to create that, and now I'm going to use W to close it. And that should give us a fresh, yeah, so now SDA is completely wiped. So now if we try it again, and we print the map, has no partitions, almost 700 GB. We're going to create a new one. Well, let's do G as usual, N, 1 plus 300 M. Value out of range. You got, oh, that's the, okay. First sector. Relax. Plus 300 M. So far, so good. N, 2, that, plus 8G. There we go. And now finally, 3, first sector, last sector. There we go. Okay, so let's set the type. So T for partition 1, we are going to make a EFI system, which is 1. And then we're going to do T again for 2. And this one's going to be our swap. So let's see, which one is swap? Linux swap is 19. So Q, and then we'll use 19. And then we can use T on the final one. And we want 20, I believe, for Linux file system. So I'll hit Q again, and then 20. There we go. And now we're going to hit W, right, and we should be good to go. All right, so that was quite the rabbit hole that we have finally navigated out of. But if I do fdisk-l/dev/sda, here we go. We have SDA is a 300 MB EFI system. We then have SDA2, which is an 8 GB Linux swap system. And finally, SDA3, which is a 690 GB Linux file system. We are good to go on our partitions. Finally. Okay. Now, we have formatted them. Oh, we have not formatted them. So let's go ahead and do that. So, mkfs.ext4, and that's going to be /dev/sda3. Still contains that? Oh, you got to be kidding. You've got to be kidding me. It didn't work. You have got to be kidding me. Wow. Apparently in use by the system. Why? Why? It should not contain an LVM2 member file system. Frowny face indeed, Arch Linux. Frowny face indeed. Get rid of this thing. You can also use ad blocker to get rid of those. As per my sir, okay. My bootloader wasn't configured properly. Sounds obvious, right? Modifying fstab doesn't quite qualify as configuring the bootloader. I had to change a line in that to refer to correct boot partition. That said, there is no need to boot off the second disk in the first place. Could have avoided this problem by completing the whole process in a live environment and just page rooting in to run make init cpio. What? That's not really relevant. Okay, so this person is running that. Let's see if I just do this. SDA. That's kind of exactly what I'm doing. Ubuntu was the original operating system I had on this machine. So, an old laptop with Lubuntu, I don't know what that is. I want to replace it with Arch Linux, but the problem is that the partition SDA1 contains 2 LVM blocks. How do I wipe those completely while also removing 2 LVM blocks? What happens if I run this? Just boot from a live image and create a new partition table. You don't need to worry about LVM. I beg to differ, K900. I do need to worry about this LVM. It's erroring out, so contains LVM file system. Yeah, that's basically what I'm getting. I'm going to make a new file system. Use cfdisk to create 2 new partitions. File system, if you ran cfdisk and haven't rebooted since, you might run part probe and then force partition changes to be picked up. That seems promising. Okay, part probe /dev/sda. Partitions 2, 3 on dev/sda have been written, but we have been unable to inform the kernel of the change, probably because it/they are in use. As a result, the old partitions will remain in use. You should reboot now before making further changes. Well, crap. Rebooting is what I really wanted to avoid because I need to open up the machine and it's kind of in a pile. Hey, Mr. Gamer, how are you? I'm doing well. Kind of running into more problems than I was hoping for this video because I had originally installed Ubuntu on this machine and it's thinking that these partitions are in use. So I really want to remove them and it wants me to reboot, but I want to avoid rebooting. Let's see. Is there a way to force it to stop? I try to just unmount it. Not mounted. Well, if I reboot it, there we go. Hard to terminal. So, looks like one of these two commands could help. This one is going to wipe the whole thing, and we would basically once again have to create the partition map, which is fine. This one seems like it's going to update it, so I'm going to try that one. Now, I don't need to use sudo here. I'm logged into the root account, so that's unnecessary. I can just say parted on dev/sda. Welcome to GNU parted. Type help, view list of commands. Okay, help. And rescue loss, delete partition. No, this is not what I want to use. So that was another program that seems like it is similar to fdisk. And perhaps using it would fix the problem if I recreated the partitions in this parted thing instead of fdisk, but that's not really the route that I want to take right here. Let's try this, the wipe fs, and let's just see if we can get that thing ready. Wipe fs/dev/sda. Okay. L/dev/a. Seems like it still has those. Contains this LVM file system. Ubuntu, why do you do this? Why would you do this to a machine? Okay. I'm thinking I have to reboot the machine, which is unfortunate because that's going to involve that. I don't even know that rebooting it is going to fix the problem, which is a shame. And it's really a shame that we're getting quite stuck on this step of the process. But this is the sort of problem you're going to run into while you're trying to install this. So it's kind of good that we're working through it. It's a little bit less exciting than I was hoping. That's all right. Trying exactly the same thing, expecting a different result. Ugh, why? Okay. Gonna reboot. You're gonna have to give me a minute here because I need to fiddle with the physical machine. Okay, we have rebooted. That connection was closed. Let's try and SSH back in. Okay. I don't know if you guys should actually see this, so I'm going to move that over to another screen and edit that file. So what happened there is every time I SSH into a machine, the signature for that machine gets saved into a certain file. And upon rebooting, that name actually was changed. So I need to remove the old name so that it can replace it. And that's fine. Clear that. Okay, so all I did was in this file, the known hosts file, I just deleted line 17. And that was the last line for me. So now if we do this again, not that, but go. Yes. And my doc is not going away. Go away, doc. There we go. Oh no. Oh no, come on. Okay, so none of the changes that I made when I prepared for this whole thing to do it in SSH worked. So I need to do one more step on the physical machine. And let me check. Mr. Gamer, I did do an fdisk L. I will show it to you in just a moment. Sorry guys, this is going really off the rails, but that's okay. That's kind of what happens. So let's keep working. I need to open the system and set a root password. I'll do that very quick and I'll be right back. Okay. So I'm going to leave it kind of ajar over to the side. I'll fix it later. And I'm just presuming that we may have more problems. So let's. And I set the password to be ABC. Yes, okay, we're here. fdisk-L. Okay, we're still. Ooh. Something I noticed. That Ubuntu thing is gone, which is good, I guess. And our partitions are here. Let's go ahead and create our partition map one more time. And horrendous. Next installation will be Gen 2. Maybe. Maybe if this one actually works. Okay, what happened? What happened where, Mr. Gamer? fdisk/dev/sda. Okay, we're going to use G to create our partition or disk label. Now we're going to do N. First partition, first sector, we'll keep the default, and we're going to give it 300 MB for that. Partition 1 contains VFAT signature. We want to remove this signature, yes. Nice, and that cow say ask. Yeah, I really like the cow. It's funny, actually. This is probably going to end up being a much longer live stream than usual because of how long it's taken, but I'll show you how to actually make something like this for your own system at the end of this once we finally get it working. Anyway, now we can create our second partition. This is going to be our swap partition, which is 2. First sector we can keep, and we're going to give it 8 GB, which is equivalent to the amount of RAM that I have on the actual hard system. Not exactly, because gigabytes and gigabytes aren't exactly the same, but it's close enough. Okay, finally we can create our last partition, partition 3, with the default first and last sectors. Now we're going to create the types. So for 1, we are going to use the type 1, which is the EFI system. Now, for the second partition, we need, I believe it was 19 for a swap partition. That's correct. And then finally, we want for sector 3, a Linux file system. Now we can use W to write this. Okay, and now we should be able to create our file systems. So mkfs.ext4/dev/sda3. Oh, yes. We have done it, ladies and germs. We are almost there. Wow, that was a lot more complicated than I was expecting, but I think that was a really useful thing for us to go through. The process of installing Arch Linux. This is exactly why people say it is not a beginner-friendly process. But think about the amount of things that we learned in doing that. Really, this is why I wanted to show this to beginners, because of the complexity. If you take your time and when you come across errors, you spend the time to really work through them, you'll really learn about what's going on. And what I found is that Ubuntu actually created I don't actually know what it was, but there was it seemed like a virtual file system on the machine that was making use of these partitions, and it was preventing me from actually going forward. And I had to reboot the entire system in order to actually use it. So later on, I'm going to add some notes to this video so that future people can skip that section if they so desire. But for now, we are good to go and we're good to move on. So we need to actually finish making these file systems. So mkfs.fat-f32 /dev/sda1, which is our boot drive. And then finally, mkswap on dev/sda2. Okay, I think we are finally good to go. We have formatted our partitions, and now we can mount the file system. Okay, we'll route the root file system to /mnt, and that's the dev root partition, which in our case is our first partition. Okay, so mount /dev/sda1 to /mnt. Good. Create any remaining mount points, such as mount EFI. Mount their corresponding volumes to create a swap. Enable it with swap on. Okay. What's our mount point for this? Oh. Okay, I actually made a bit of a mistake. So this needs to be on /mount. So you mount, rid of that one. SDA3 goes to MNT. Now, what's happening here? Essentially, if you think of a folder on your machine, what we're doing is basically accessing this drive through this folder. So now this folder, when I open it, if I do anything in there, it gets saved into this partition. And it kind of works like a USB. I can mount this drive to any folder I want, and then anything I do in that folder will actually be saved on this drive. So if I wanted to, I could plug in a USB, mount it to my home directory, put a bunch of files in there, and then take out the USB, plug it in somewhere else, mount it somewhere else, and those files will be there. It basically works like a USB. And we need to put these in a particular place so that they can be used when we're actually trying to set things up. So what we've done right now is mounted the largest drive, the big sector of our hard drive, to this base/mount directory. And now we need to mount within there to mount/boot or mount/EFI. Let's see what we have in /mnt. We don't have anything there at all. Do I need to actually make that directory? Maybe. I want to see what's in there before I have actually mounted anything. Not SDA1, but 3. And now if I do ls on/mnt, there's nothing in there. Okay. Mr. Gamer. Yeah, Linux partition is different from operating systems like Windows. I don't know that it is actually, because I think, now I'm not an expert on Windows, so maybe you have more to tell me here, but I think it actually does work in a very similar way. That if you plug a USB into a Windows machine, I think it mounts it in a particular folder. It names it as a drive, so maybe that isn't the same thing. I don't really know, but I do know that it does do that on Mac OS, for instance. Anyway, you can see that our mount folder is empty, so I am going to go ahead and mount it to where we wanted. And then I need to make a directory in mount called, let's call it boot. And then we can mount /dev/sda1 to /mnt/boot. Okay. And now we need to turn on our swap partition. So swap on /dev/sda2. Huzzah. DU, installing grub is the hardest step for me. Yeah, well, apparently partitioning the hard drives was pretty difficult for me, largely due to the fact that I had Ubuntu installed on the system prior. That caused a lot of problems. But we'll see, we're about to get there. So we have mounted our file systems, and now we can select our mirrors. And packages must be installed to download for mirror services, which are defined here. Is 20, blah, blah, blah. The higher a mirror place, the more priority is given. Horrendous. Just use EFI stub and skip grub. I don't have a bootloader. I don't really know what you mean you don't have a bootloader. I don't think you could actually use the system without one. Anyway, so let's take a look at these mirrors. Which mirror do we want to use? And what we want to do is say that the higher it is on the list, the more priority it is given. So let's edit it so that the one we want is up top. So we're going to nano that file. And let's see. Telepoint.bg. There's not really one that says United States. Let's just leave it alone. That seems fine. I don't know otherwise, so let's just keep on rolling. Okay, and we need the packstrap to install the base package and Linux kernel. Okay, so here is where we get to make another interesting decision. So which kernel of Linux do we want? So we actually can choose. Let's see. There are a few officially supported versions. Interesting. Horrendous is saying EFI is the bootloader and the BIOS boots directly into the kernel. How did you do that? Is it booting in a BIOS mode, or if we look at the installation guide, maybe you're using this mode, BIOS with MBR, instead of UEFI. But my system has to use UEFI, so anyway, maybe I'm not understanding what you're suggesting. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the different versions of the kernel, and I'm going to close some of these tabs. So there's the stable version. This is the vanilla Linux kernel and its typical modules. This is basically the default one that is installed. The hardened kernel is security focused, so it has additional patches that mitigate kernel and user space exploits. We also have the long-term support kernel and the Zen kernel. Now, the Zen is a collaborative effort of kernel hackers to provide the best Linux kernel possible for everyday systems. I am not particularly interested in that. I don't really want it designed by committee. I'm sure there's plenty of great use cases for this, but that's just not my cup of tea. However, I do want to think about these other versions. So this is kind of the obvious choice, the stable version. I'm sorry, I'm reading Horrendous's comments. It's for me advanced people, I guess. You saying I'm not? You fighting words. Anyway, so which version do we want? So let's think about the use case here. So in my case, I am going to be building a node on my blockchain, and this is going to be accessible over the internet. So hardened seems like a wise choice. I definitely want these hardening patches, and especially if you think of recent news with the Linux kernel of, I think it was University of one of the M's. I don't want to call out the wrong school, but they were intentionally submitting bad code to the kernel to exploit it and introduce vulnerabilities. So the hardened kernel is appealing more due to current events, and the long-term support also appeals. I'm not really sure which version I will want. Any suggestions in the comments? Which one do you guys think? Stable, hardened, or long-term? I'm kind of leaning towards one of these two. The hardened one I'm a bit nervous about because I don't know that it is a official version. It's in the officially supported kernels, but I don't know that this is an official Linux version. Long-term support, I believe, is. Let's see that. Linux hardened. Yeah, I'm thinking hardened is probably what we'll go for here. I haven't done that before, and it might be a bit different, but I think given the use case, I'm going to be opening this up to the internet and writing a custom application for it to be used with, so I think the hardened kernel is probably a wise choice. So let's take a look. Packstrap on /mount base, and I'm going to do Linux-hardened there. So packstrap /mnt. Horrendous, you're saying stable? You mean long term? Oh, you're thinking just the vanilla one, right? Hardened has SE Linux stuff, and ooh-wee. SE Linux, I don't know what that is. Let's take a look. SE Linux is a security architecture for Linux system that allow administrators to have more control over who can access the system. Originally developed by the United States National Security Agency as a series of patches to the Linux kernel using Linux security modules. That sounds pretty sweet. Thought it was for desktop. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is. It seems like it's for the server. User space at various Linux distributions. Well, unfortunately, I'm conflicted here because on the one hand, this really sounds like what I want. On the other hand, I would be installing something that I don't understand, and that's typically not what I want to do. Also have a SE context consisting of name, role. Now, I don't want to run into any problems later, so if you think about when I'm opening sockets on the system, I don't know if this is going to cause a problem. Certain actions with a given target. Well, you know what? I'm going to try it. If it doesn't work, I can always reinstall the operating system because it went so smoothly this time. So, unless someone yells at me in the comments in the next few minutes, I'm going to try Linux hardened just to see. Maybe I won't like it. We'll find out. Anyway, we're going to do base, Linux hardened, and Linux firmware. Okay, we're going to do Linux hardened. Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, nothing is coming in the chat. So, there we go. All right. While this is installing, I'm going to grab some water and I'll be right back. Looks like it's almost there. Mr. Gamer, Pac-Man is very good. Package manager. Yeah, I've always heard good things about it, especially for updates. Pac-Man is really good. And yeah, there's a lot to like about Arch Linux. And horrendous. You're saying that you can just swap the kernel if you don't like it. And do you know this is not my first installation of Arch Linux? I have done it before, but in previous installations, I was doing it over a Windows machine, which did not create that LVM partition that was giving us so much trouble. So it seems that the problem I was having earlier was due to a previous installation of Ubuntu, not to Arch Linux. So no, I have done this before, believe it or not. And I don't really know the difference between these package managers, Mr. Gamer. So I'm not really sure why one would be better than the other. I do know that with Pac-Man, I did see a conversation online about how easy it is to update things. So I don't really know beyond that, but anyway. And horrendous, actually, in the tutorial that I followed for my first installation, it was with, I'll go ahead and show you the channel. It was with this gentleman over here. Be in my subscription box somewhere. Learn Linux TV. This gentleman here did my first, walked me through the setup the first time, and I believe in the version that I watched, he installed both the standard vanilla kernel and the long-term support kernel. So I do believe you're right that we can switch back and forth pretty easily. Okay, let's check. Almost there. I'm sure streaming at the same time is not making this faster. Let's take a look what the next step will be. We've done this. And now we need to configure the system. So we'll generate the FS tab. I always call it fstab. I think it's FS tab, but fstab is funnier. And we will make that, and then we will actually root into the new system. And I'm going to try and create the bare minimum installation possible once we actually get into the system. The reason being, I found that some of the other tutorials that I've watched were a bit customized for the actual person making it. And I don't really appreciate that, because it's the whole point of Arch Linux is that it only has the things you need, and if I install a bunch of stuff that I don't need, well, it kind of defeats the purpose. Okay, we are good to go here. We have the Linux hardened system. Hooray! So now we need to generate the FS tab. So gen FS tab and -u /mnt and do little arrow things. slash mnt. We're going to pipe it into mount slash etc slash fs tab. Okay. And now we can root into the system. Check the resulting and edit for file. Okay, we'll check it. Fine. I don't see any errors. I don't know what kind of errors I would see. Yeah, that looks fine to me. All right. Okay, arch to root. On to slash mnt. We are in the new system. Hooray. Okay, so we will check the time zone. Let's see. Should be the same. I kind of want to know what that's going to output. Okay. Okay, well, I don't know what that exactly was. HW clock, this to HC. Dash dash. Okay. Thanks, DU. Okay, we'll generate the localization and other locales. Locale gen. Okay, complete. And this file, okay. C slash, oh, we need to use nano here. Select your zone and city. Do I need to actually write something in those files, or is it good to go? I'm not really sure. Locale.figure. Oh, I don't have nano? Yeah, let's go ahead and install nano. So I said I was going to do a bare minimum installation. I consider nano to be part of a bare minimum installation. Okay, there we go. And let's just copy and paste that in. Nice. Okay, if you set the keyboard layout, make the changes present. I did not. Okay. You should set your region and city. ls user share zone info. Do that. Okay. So ls slash user slash share slash zone info. Region slash city. York like this. Vim. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Serious, you could use. I don't. I know I could use Vim, but ooh-wee. Are you? And your name seems to be written in Russian or one of the Eastern European languages. I apologize, I can't recognize which. I think it looks like you're saying to. Looks like you're saying to type it in like this, but that does not look like a typical Linux command. Is that what you're telling me to run? I'm going to, I think there's a delay between when I actually say things and when you guys hear it, so I'm going to keep going, and if you want me to do something like that, let me know. Vim is a text editor for Vim. Yeah. Vim. I just don't like it. I always have trouble exiting Vim. I just don't like it. Create the hostname file. Okay. Okay. Cool. So now we get to set the host name, and this is pretty cool. Oh yeah, I am from North Carolina, so it would be New York. You're right. And what is our host name going to be? Let's see. This is going to be the main. Oh yeah. I got those. Alpha node. So this is kind of the, in a sense, a central node on the blockchain network we're creating. There we go. Braxton, ln-sf/user. Are you sure it's L-zone info? Let me see. Zone info. I think that was a typo. /America /New York and Etsy / By the way, I am trying to use UTC time on this machine. I know that locally I am Eastern time, but on the blockchain network that I'm creating, every single node is going to use UTC. So I want to set this as UTC. Anyway, let's keep going. You guys are still helping me out with that part. We're keep the comments coming with that. I'll keep working on that as we go. It's just a matter of there's a bit of a delay between me saying things and you seeing things and responding to it. So I'm going to keep moving as we go, but please keep sending in those suggestions. I still don't think we have the time zones set up just yet. When I do ls/etc, there is no local time. Oh, well, there it is. Okay. What's going on here? It's right there. Peculiar. Keep rolling. Okay. So, got that. Network configuration. Yes, we set the host name. And add matching entries to hosts. Yes. So, I'm going to actually do this. So now this one's pretty cool. So I'm going to open up a new tab here, and I'm going to, what we can see is here's my hosts files for my my Mac, and this allows me to refer to things by name. So instead of SSH 192.168.0.200, I can use that. I can basically use it as a URL. And so what I want to do is largely copy this file so that I have the same information available. And let's take all of this and let's paste it here. And an extra S there. That's a bit, where's that coming from? Okay, looking at your comments. No, just zone info. Yeah, my bad. To set the clock to UCT, run the command time date CTL set locale RTC0. Symbolic link to ls-h. Okay, I'll take care of those in just a second. Let's make sure I got this correct. See, we got those in there, we got those in there, and actually these are not all the same. So I think that's the IP of this one. And we'll call it bridge.local. So these are all of my other systems on my network, and so I can refer to them by name here, which is going to be great. Anyway, so I'm adding those into hosts, and now we need to create Oh, sorry, I wanted to go back to this. Set the clock to UTC. Run the command. Time, date, CTL, set local RTC 0. Nice. Is there a way I can print out the time just to see it? And LS AH on /Etsy/ Ah, I see. This is a symbolic link to this one. I see. And what I want is not this, but I want that to refer to PC. Well, okay, this seems to be... It thinks it's the right time. But it's pointing this local to New York. I don't know. That's kind of weird. We'll keep going with that. Anyway, we need to create an init RAM file system. Usually not required because of that was run on the installation of the kernel package for LVM systems encrypted with RAID. We are not going to do this. And the root password. Okay, so let's set a root password. Date. At the time. Okay. April 24th. That looks, yeah, that's good enough for me. And all of the nodes on the network are going to use this UTC time. And that'll just make it so that everybody is in complete agreement everywhere. I don't know why we don't just do this worldwide. If someone can explain why it makes a difference that we call 1500 hours a different thing all the way around the world, please explain it to me because I don't understand. Anyway, let's set the password for the root account. And actually, I'm just going to set this as something simple for now, and I'll change it later to something more cryptic. Okay. Choose and install the Linux-capable bootloader. Okay. Now we're going to need probably grub. Which one? Now I remember using grub. Yeah, okay, we can use grub. Okay, EFI systems installation. Install the packages. Those two. Bootloader and EFI boot manager is used by the grub installation script to write boot entries to NVRAM. Okay. Following steps to install grub. Mount the EFI partition and remainder. We got that. Oh yeah, DU's excited. All right, so let's go ahead. I think we can just run this command exactly as is. But I think we need to, do we need to use Pacman to get these first? I think we do. So I think it's Pacman to get grub and EFI boot manager. And then we're basically just going to run this command, and that's going to set everything up. But this EFI directory is what I need to be careful about because I don't know what the parameter is supposed to be there. So let's first install grub and EFI boot manager. Did I spell that right? Okay. Have you ever used regular expressions in C? I don't think I've used them in C, and to be honest, I avoid using them in most languages. I find them a bit unnecessary. I'm sure they're great for some things, but they're so unreadable that if there's a better solution, I will. Well, if there's another solution, I'll tend to go for it. All right, so now let's do this. And what I want to be careful of is this EFI directory. And Install its modules into that. You need to change ESP. Yeah, what do I need to change it to? EFI directory. Mount the EFI system partition and it's under substitute ESP with the mount point. So that is /MNT/boot. That's right. Okay. So we'll paste that in, and this is going to go /MNT/boot. Okay. Do I need to create that? ESP with its mount point. I guess we need to do that within the system? I thought it already was mounted, though. So what's confusing me here is that it's asking me to mount this boot hold or this partition. So if we do, it's asking me to mount this EFI boot partition onto /MNT/boot, but it already is mounted there. So I'm not sure what that means. So let's see. You guys are talking about regular expressions. Oh boy. Okay. So that is yet another rather confusing thing in this installation guide, is that it tells us to mount the partition, but I've already mounted it. And it's mounted to somewhere that it's not seeing. Unless I need to mount it somewhere else. Mount the EFI system partition. The kernel's blah, blah, blah. In most cases, the processor's microcode needs to be accessible by the bootloader or UEFI itself to boot the system. Thus, if you want to keep the setup simple, your bootloader choice limits the available mount points for your EFI system partition. Typical mount points. Simplest scenarios for mounting EFI partitions are ESP2/EFI and use bootloader, which is capable of accessing kernels. Okay. /boot is a preferred method when doing that. Run lsblk real quick. Yes, I can. See, SDA1, that's our EFI partition, and it's mounted to /boot. What was I supposed to do? Did I do that wrong? Yeah. There it is. Okay. Okay, didn't you click away from the install guide into Grub's specific page? I did. But if we go back to the actual install guide, right here. You know, okay, what was confusing me was that I remembered it incorrectly. So up here, I should not have criticized them so quickly. My apologies there. What we did was we mounted the root partition, and we mounted that to /boot, and I thought we mounted it to /MNT/boot. So I thought it had disappeared once we had entered the system through chroot, and indeed it had not. I had just remembered incorrectly. It is where it is. Your EFI mounting is at /boot. Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Braxton. Okay. No errors reported. We are done with that installation. I think we are almost ready to go. But before we do, I want to, again, This is a headless server. I'm not going to ever use the keyboard on this. So let's go ahead and create a user account that can use SSH. And I don't believe we have it set up yet. So systemctl, we haven't even installed it yet. So pacman-s, gotta close out this tab. What is it called? Let's make sure I get this correct. I'm just trying to remember the package name. Installation. OpenSSH. Yep. Okay. And now we can nano/etsy/ well, let's find out what it's actually called first. And where's the configuration file? Maybe I need to start it first. Okay. I'm looking for the configuration file for OpenSSH, where .ssh, interesting. Client. I want a server usage. SSH. PQRS. Of course. hd_config and not dot anything. Okay. Let's see. Around permit root login. No, we will not allow the root to log in. But I do want to share my SSH key. So enable, is that what it's called? SSHD, not open. So what I'm doing here is setting it up so that SSH will run as soon as the system starts. So I want SSH kind of running from the beginning. And it doesn't like that I call it SSHD service. Okay, so now SSH will start anytime that the actual system boots. And what I need now is an actual user account that can log into the system. So let's create my user, and I'm going to go ahead and actually find the commands. So I think it's like user add or something like that. Yep. Sometimes I just like to check the command to make sure that I get it right. We're going to use user add. I'm going to put in the username, but I want to make sure it creates the home directory. And yeah, create a home directory and /home/username. Okay, so we'll use -m. So go. So it's created my user and added a home directory. And now I want to set a password for that user. The password. Oops, that's not what I wanted. For that account. So you need a password on the account in order to actually use SSH. So I have created a non-root account and given it a password. Now it should be able to SSH into the system. And there's one more thing I want to do, and that's share my public SSH key. So Let's see. There's a command to share the public key I want to find. I already have one generated. Got it generated. Load SSH copy ID. There we go. Okay, so over on the Mac, what I want to do is SSH underscore copy ID. And we're going to do that to Eric at 1992.168.0.109. Might not work. Dashes, not underscores. Good. And the password. Uh-oh. Okay. I don't think the password thing worked. And let me make sure that I've set everything up here correctly. So, for configuration, allow users, groups. I think I might need to restart the system and actually boot it not in chroot in order to do this. So is there anything else we need to do here before we do that? Let's see. We have grub installed. We have our bootloader. That should be good to go. Ooh. AMD CPU microcode updates in addition. What's this? Processor manufacturers release stability and security updates for their processor microcode. These updates provide bug fixes that can be critical of the stability of your system. Without them, you may experience serious crashes or unexpected system halts that can be difficult to track down. Okay, so let's install one. And this is an Intel machine, so I need this one. Pacman-S and Intel -U code. Okay. So let me think. Is there anything else that I'm going to need here? Oh, yes. Okay, so another thing. I am running the machine in clamshell mode. So what that means is that when I actually close the lid, it does not power off. And that's what allows me to basically leave it in the corner as a server. And so what I need to do is make sure that this new setup will also do that. And that is in etc/systemd. And which one? Nano login-d.conf. So if we go down to handle lid switch, we're going to uncomment this, and we're going to set it to ignore. Now, whenever the lid or the screen of that laptop closes, it's just not going to do anything. It stays powered on, which lets me use it as a server over there in the corner. So we got that set up. So let's see, I have my user account. I will change the root password once I have booted into the main system. We have our bootloader. We have gotten our microcode for that particular CPU. And now we can exit chroot. And then we are going to manually unmount all the partitions. Horrendous. Regen the grub config to add kernel command microcode state. Oh, regen the grub configuration. Okay. So that was done with this command, right? No. UEFI systems. There we go. This. Thank you, Horrendous. And we're going to do this on /boot. And while that runs, we can exit and we'll unmount all of those drives. And then we will reboot the system. And I need to remove the installation medium in order to do that. Set in the microcode section. I guess I should have read that a little more carefully. Let's see. Looks like that's what I actually needed to run. Okay. Thank you for that, Horrendous. That could have been a problem. All right, so we've got that, and let's go ahead and exit. Okay, so now we can unmount everything. And we can reboot. And I need to do this a little bit carefully. So I'm going to move over towards the machine, and I'm going to unplug the USB as soon as I hit this. Give me 1 second. Right. USB. Back up. Okay. I'm going to put my face cam back on. All right. Handsome mug has returned. And now we should be able to SSH right back into Gene. All right. Wish me luck here. So SSH 92.168.0.109. And let's see what actually happens. Not looking good. Not necessarily booted up yet. Host is down. Okay. I'm going to go onto my local network, and I'm going to move this over to another screen because I don't necessarily want you guys to see the configuration of my network. Not that I don't trust you. So let's see what. I'm checking to see what its IP address is. Make sure it didn't change when I rebooted. Looks like it might have. Can't tell necessarily. Moving this back. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Down. Okay. So the way this works, I forget that you guys can actually see me now, but I get the chat back. Nice haircut. Thank you, Mr. Gamer. It was about time, right? You install DHCP client. No, I did not. Nope. So, that could be a problem. That could be a problem. So one of the problems is that this is on a, for the network, this is on a, I forget what they call it, not a hotspot, but a bridge, I think it's called, and they all show up with a conglomerate of IP addresses, and so I just know all of the ones that are attached, not the specific ones. So it's possible that 110 is correct. Probably not right. No. That was a different server. Yeah, DU says it's bad. Okay. I think it's more salvageable than we expect. So you can never get it right the first time. It's like a rite of passage. Well, you know, this isn't my first time doing it, so apparently you don't get it right the 10th time either. That's fine, though. I think this is salvageable. So I'm just going to try to SSH to... It's not worth doing, honestly. It's not going to work. But I think what we can do is... if I boot back into the installation medium and I mount those partitions back where they were and we chroot back into the machine, we could probably install DHCP client and fix this. Okay, so let's give that a try. I'm going to... you guys can still have to watch me. What I can see on the screen here is it's giving me a login prompt. Log into the logged in, connected to the directly. Okay. Area spot, but yeah, we need to talk about this. Let's figure this out. So I'm not connected to the internet, and that's a problem. Install something over the internet in order to get there. So I am going to have to reboot and do this in the live environment. Okay, it's unfortunate, but that's what we're going to have to do, fortunately. Go. Right. Power off. Starting up that port forwarding. Well, problem is, yeah, yes, it wasn't connected. That opening the ports on the network at all. As the client already installed, I can then as it was and back into. Let's see. Where I create a lot of unnecessary work for myself. This whole live stream has been way crazier than I expected, but it's been a lot of fun. I'm really glad you guys are joining me. Anyway, that work? Not? Okay, well that's a good sign. Remember earlier we had to edit this file as well. I just don't know how much of a security threat it is for me to show you guys some of this stuff. So, like if you guys saw all of the IDs from my known hosts, I don't know if that is a security concern or not, actually. So that's why I'm sometimes moving things to another screen. And to be honest, if you guys told me it wasn't a security concern, probably still, I don't know, like, isn't that exactly what you would say if it was a security concern? Just noticing. Where are you guys? There you are. Oh, okay. You need port forwarding even on a local network. I must say I came from a Reddit comment and I did not expect this energy. I'm really enjoying the stream and your personality. Braxton, that is very kind of you to say. Thank you so much. Really glad you're liking it. And I do them every Saturday. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. All right. Now, port forwarding on a local network is not necessary. No, it's not necessary. So what's happening basically is your router, the thing that's connecting you to the internet, is itself a computer. And the way it works is that the internet is just a bunch of nodes, that is these routers. And when you type in my IP address, that is my public IP address, that is the IP address of my router. And what you'll do port forwarding for is if someone makes an incoming request to my router needs to know which local machine to send it to, because to the outside world, all of my local machines look the same. They all have exactly the same one public IP address. So your port forwarding is a way for your router to say that this particular package is directed for this particular machine on the local network. If you're on a local network, if like my laptop here and one of those servers over there, it's not necessary to port forward because I can identify that computer directly as its local IP address. So no, you don't need to port forward on a local network. And again, thank you for the kind comment. I appreciate that. Okay. So we can now SSH back into our system. We'll add the fingerprint. Password. I don't think this is the right account. Try this one more time. Okay. I think that's wrong. Okay. You just set a root password. No problem. 1 second. there's a Stack Overflow joke to make about that pile of computers right there, but okay. Braxton, I definitely will try to tune in every Saturday then. Looking at your channel, you have some awesome content as well. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Thank you. That's very kind. And horrendous, yes, my name is Eric. And I did create an Eric account on that machine, if that's what you're asking, but we're trying to boot into the live environment. And to do that, I need that root account. So we've already typed in the command. Okay. Now we need to mount /dev/SDA 3 to MNT. We need to mount /dev/SDA1 to /boot. And then chroot arch root. To /MNT, I believe that's correct. Okay. Well, let's check something real quick. I'm going to ls/home. Remember, we created a user account. And if that user account is still there and this is working the way I'm hoping, it should be there. Okay, I think this is salvageable. SDA1 to /MNT/boot. I don't think that's entirely necessary right now. I think you're probably right. That seems... Let's see something. Yeah, I think you were right about that, but I don't think it's going to make a difference here. So, yeah, thank you, Morton. But what I need to do is pacman-s DHCP client. Now let's see. Let's search for it on the wiki. Make sure. DHCP. Believe this DHCP server. I think I need DHCLIENT, DH client. I think that's what I need because this is for the server, correct? Client package. I think I think it's this one, DHCPCD. I think that's what I'm looking for here. So let's DHCPCD. HCPCD. I think that's correct. I'm not seeing anybody yelling at me in the chat just yet, but you guys are on a bit of a delay, so I'm going to give you a few seconds. And we are going to press enter. Yep, there we go. Thanks, Horrendous. That'll give you a good sense for the time delay between you typing something or me saying something and you reading something. Anyway, okay, we got it. Okay. And do I need to enable it on the system? DHCP and DHC client are interchangeable. If you need networking, you are better off with Network Manager. Don't really need networking just yet, so I'm going to stick with DHCP. And I don't think I need to enable it. Not run 2 clients simultaneously. Yeah, there's the Network Manager you were talking about. And that. You said yes, but I don't know if yes means I do need to enable it or I do not. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. Start and enable. DHCPCD. Okay. Now I think we are good to go. Does anybody see anything else that I have missed? We have our internet connection. I have SSH and my user account set up. The Linux kernel's installed. I think we're good. I think we're good. So I'm going to exit. I'm just going to close out. But there was that unmounting everything. umount-r. Okay, and now we can reboot. I'm going to unplug it as soon as I hit the button. We're going to give it a second and hopefully actually kind of cheat. By looking at that Ethernet cable, and I can see that there are no lights turning on. Frightening, but now the light is on, so I think that's a good sign. That is a good sign. Mr. Punk. Ooh, wee, that's quite the name you've got there, sir. Not very family friendly. Anyway, did I start the DHCP-CD service? I did. I enabled it so that every time the system reboots, it will start. Okay, so we are good on that. Horrendous has got that. So I need to edit this known hosts thing again. Bring this bad boy over here. Sorry. That will not be something I have to change all the time in the future. It's just because I'm switching back and forth between this live environment and the actual installation that I have to keep updating this fingerprint. So it's using the same IP address, but those two installations have different fingerprints, and that's what's causing my system to think something strange is going on. It's trying to warn me that it thinks that someone is like pretending to be my machine. So it's a good warning, but right now it's becoming a little bit a nuisance. Okay. We're in. We have got an Arch Linux installation alpha node right there. Ooh-wee. Yeah, we're there. We are there. Thank you guys so much for the help there. This was a lot more complicated than I expected it to be. So you guys, your input has been absolutely fantastic. And it seems like a lot of you guys are new, so I'm going to take the opportunity to recommend you subscribe to the channel. You've been with me for a few hours now, and if you're enjoying it, I make a lot of content like this. Also, we have a Discord server that should be in the description, and we're pretty active over there. I've seen some of you guys before, so I know that I'm not talking to entirely new people here. I appreciate that. Let's do a little bit more before we close out, and I think we'll be good to go. So I want to give my SSH key POG. Indeed. So I want to give it my SSH key because I don't want people to just be able to guess my password. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to log out of that SSH connection, and I'm going to do ssh-copy-id. And I'm going to do it to 192.168.0.109. I'm going to try and copy it over. Probably ask for my password. Okay. So that has added my SSH private key to my server. So now I can log in with that. And what I want to do is so we're going to nano, well, let's just /etc/ssh. And I want to nano not that. I didn't add, forgot sudo. Okay. Couple comments. Already earned that sub and gonna turn on that notification. You're the man, Braxton. Thank you. Always cool to come across hidden gems like your channel. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. I forgot to install sudo. There's always something. There's always got to be something. And I don't think I can do it here. Don't have permission. I need to be root. So how do I log into the root account? So SU. Does this user have the ability to do? No. Okay. Can I log in as the root on this machine? I don't have sudo. That's the problem, is that it doesn't, I forgot to install sudo. So I need to install sudo, and in order to install sudo, I need to be sudo. So let's log in as the root. Root is default locked, so you can't, unless you set a password. Root pass. Actually, I think if I open this machine right here, I'll be able to. Let's give it a try. I dressed myself this morning, not expecting anybody to the fact that I was in a black shirt. So usually I don't get up and walk around during. I found out. Comfortable. Gotten And I should be able to add my user. I did not set a root password. Didn't you disable root over SSH? Probably. It sounds like something I would have done. So which sudo? We don't have which? Oh boy. Sudo's there. What was I going to install a second ago? I think I was installing sudo. I think it's by sudo. Gotta add myself to the group. Okay. And let's just take a look. Won't even let me look at it, naturally. Okay. I think I just need to add it to the group wheel, and that should do it. But there it is. Group, make sure you change the username with the username of the group. You need sudo access. AG. Now I wish I could read etc sudo res. I'm going to go back to that computer and read it so I know that I'm adding myself to the correct group. As a matter of fact, I might opt to use sudo on the actual machine just to save a step. I'll see. I'll let you know what I do. We're in the home stretch here, guys. We're in the home stretch. Okay. So it's not wheel. It's wheel on some systems, but sudo. Group sudo does not exist. I think I might need to reboot. Oh boy. Okay. Mr. You know who. Permit root login only stops SSHing as root, right? I can change to root after SSH. Yes, you can. That's right. So you would do that with SU for super user, and then, oh, I wonder if it's hey, there it is. Okay. So what I was trying to do, let me show you. What I was doing with SU, that's going to change you to the super user account. Okay, so what I did here was type in the password for my Eric account, but that wasn't correct. I need the password for the root account. My mistake. That would have been a lot easier. Okay, so now if I this and user privileges specification. Yeah, this group wheel. That's what it was. But it's actually commented. So let's see. Is it 2 E's or 1 E? H-E-E-L-E or W-H-E-E-L? E-E-L. Okay. Spelling was never my strong suit. So. What was I even... I'm losing my trains of thoughts here, guys. What was I even trying to do? Add myself to the group wheel. User mod -A G W H E L Eric. Okay, so now if I hit Control D, the incident will be reported. Okay. They got me. That's funny. All right. Let's try that again. The vi sudo, and I'm just going to add something in here specifically for Eric. All equals all. Let's just do that. C and sudo ls. We've got it. Okay. We can sudo, we can do that. What I need to do now is why I was even doing this in the first place. So ls/etc/ssh, we want to take this sshd config file and edit it. ssh/this. And now at this point, I need to use sudo. Whole point of me having done that. So what we want to do is permit let's see. Where is it? We want to make it so that the root cannot log in. Yep, there we go. We set that to no. And we want to make it so that they have to use a key. So they're not going to be able to put in a password. You have to have the public key. And that makes it a very secure system. Horrendous. Log in and out. Type groups to see if you are in wheel. Okay, I'll do that in just a second. Thank you. Let's see. Public key authentication. Let's Google it so I don't have to find it. Know how it works. See. Password authentication, no. Okay. There it was. And is there anything else that we need? We just need to restart it. Okay. Okay. Order. Okay. Okay, now let's just, okay, I'll do that command. Groups. Eric, apparently I'm not in the group wheel. So it doesn't matter. I have the sudo privileges now, so I'm just going to leave that for the time being. And let's just do something kind of fun. So I want to nano/etsy/motd. Use sudo. This is the message of the day. This is what prints out to the screen whenever you log into the system, and I want to make it something. So let's do something fun. What I'm going to do is ASCII art generator, and I have a particular favorite that I like. Whoa, that's not the one. Nope. There we go. I like alpha node, the name of the system, and what's the one that I like? 3D label, I think it's called. Banner 3D. Yeah. So I'm just going to copy all of that. I'm going to put a few spaces, paste it, put a few more spaces, write it. And now whenever I log into the system, that's what's going to display. So if I actually log out and then SSH back in, there it is. It prints out my alpha node message. So that is our message of the day. We have our host name. By the way, Mr. PAF is another way to say my name. That is a good name. Good thing to know. Okay, thank you, Mr. PAF. Okay, well, I think that is going to suffice for today. We've got our installation set up, and it was more of a task than I thought it was going to be because I had Ubuntu installed on that already. So I'm just going to throw out another pitch. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, maybe leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. And also we have a Discord server that you can continue to participate with us in over the week. Also, I'm pretty active on GitHub, and there are a lot of projects we're working on over there. So they're all open for community contributions, and I love having you guys contribute things. So I really appreciate you joining me here today. It was a lot of fun. It was more difficult than I expected it to be, but that made it more interesting. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo.